Address: glassonsfmedium.com. Secure and validated. Get started. Open an app. Homepage. Author homepage. Follow. Subscribe. 109 followers. Expand navbar. Get started. Open an app. Homepage. What you don't know about whistleblowers. The reality for whistleblowers is more complicated than you might think. Chelsea Glasson. Chelsea Glasson. 14 hours ago. 9 minutes read. Member-only content. Share on Twitter. Share on Facebook. Share on LinkedIn. Like many of you, I was inspired by whistleblower Frances Haugen's interview on 60 Minutes. I read the testimony she gave to the Senate subcommittee, and I followed the news coverage as business leaders and journalists responded to her claims. As a software engineer with a Harvard MBA, she was confident, knowledgeable, and prepared. Frances came armed with piles of documentation to support her claim that Facebook is putting profits over people, and needs to be regulated just like tobacco and opioids. Her words set off a firestorm. Even the politicians were impressed. Connecticut Senator Richard Blumenthal gushed about her testimony before Congress, both on the Senate floor and to the press. He said to Frances, "Your being here really sends a profound message to our nation that one person can really make a difference. One person standing up and speaking out. I think there are other whistleblowers. And in the tech world you are showing them that there is a way to make this industry more responsible. We will do everything and anything to protect and stop any retaliation against you and any legal action." Wow. Right, it really seems like whistleblowers are having a moment, particularly women in tech, and especially thanks to Black and LGBTQ women. Of course there's Dr. Timnit Gebru with her vitally important work about the dangers of racism in AI, and her initiatives to bring more diversity and equity to tech. There's Ifeoma Azoma and her incredible efforts on the Silenced No More Act, which was recently signed into law in California. I also want to mention Sophie Zhang, who for years now has been vocal about issues such as Facebook accounts and likes being used to sway elections globally. And there are so many others, a lot of them working under the radar. But, as I know from my own journey, the reality for whistleblowers is a lot more complicated than it looks on television and in the news. For every Frances there are many more workers whose story never breaks through the noise. And that's if they even decide to come forward in the first place. For every person who files a lawsuit, gives testimony to Congress, or writes an open letter, there are countless others suffering in silence, afraid of retaliation, fearful of losing their health insurance or immigration status, or worried that speaking up will ruin their careers. And even if they do speak out, they may eventually end up having to surrender under the massive time, effort and resources required to hold these huge tech companies accountable. Not to mention the emotional impact that comes with being the face of a big issue. I should know. The past 3 years of my life that I've spent fighting Google have taken a greater toll on me and my family than I could have ever imagined. Some of you might already know parts of my story. You may have heard that after nearly 5 happy and successful years as a researcher at Google, I made a complaint with HR about my executive boss discriminating against a fellow mother who reported to me. You might know that soon thereafter I began experiencing retaliation and discrimination myself, and that things only got worse when I became pregnant with my second child. You might have read my open letter called "I'm Not Returning to Google After Maternity Leave, and Here Is Why," which was read by over 12,000 Googlers. You may have heard that my experience inspired pregnancy discrimination legislation, and that my jury trial against Google will be starting in just 2 months. But what you don't know is what speaking out has cost me, and I don't just mean financially, though that part also hasn't been easy. I'll give you just a few examples. Immediately after publishing my open letter, I learned that Google HR found no wrongdoing in my case. Surprise. I then decided to take legal action. That meant first filing a complaint with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. I learned that you only have 6 months from the last instance of discrimination to file with the EOC. So, along with caring for a newborn and a toddler and starting a new job at Facebook, the clock was already ticking. It was an overwhelming situation and I needed support. I engaged an attorney to help. I paid that attorney on an hourly basis and it ended up costing over $10,000. This is on top of another $10,000 that I had already paid to lawyers while I was still employed at Google to try to stop the retaliation. After filing my EOC complaint, the Google defense machine kicked into high gear. They attacked my character and work ethic, and they also doubled down on their argument that I deserved the low calibration score I received when I was 4 months into my maternity leave. In the midst of corresponding with the EOC, I also learned just how understaffed and under-resourced the agency is. It became increasingly clear that if I was to have any chance at justice, I would need to file a lawsuit. This started me on a process of vetting specialized litigators, which at times felt like being at an hours-long job interview that involved reliving my trauma over and over and over again. They were also interviewing me, to evaluate whether my evidence and demeanor could stand a chance in court. I learned that for most attorneys, going up against a Goliath like Google is a non-starter, no matter how solid the case. And most plaintiffs like me don't have the $500,000 it can take to fund a lawsuit against Google. I needed to find an attorney to work on contingency. I'm grateful that I finally did hire the right legal team. Ironically, 2 of my attorneys became mothers themselves during the long course of my lawsuit. But contingency doesn't mean free. I don't pay up front for my attorney's fees, but I'm still responsible for many of the costs associated with the litigation, including deposition reporter fees, court filing fees, and expert witness fees. As of today, this lawsuit has cost me $56,000. I'm incredibly grateful to the American Association of University Women and the Solidarity Fund by Coworker for helping me cover some of these costs. Even with the help, I anticipate by the end of my trial I will have spent over $100,000 of my own money holding Google accountable. By contrast, my former Google boss, the one named in my lawsuit who had a history of reported misconduct, was likely rewarded with a generous severance to leave Google following my and others' complaints. Just like so many other Google executives in the past who engaged in misconduct. With Google's track record here, it's no wonder that Google's legal team is refusing to provide any details on the topic, claiming that the executive is protected by a confidentiality agreement she likely signed upon accepting a severance. She also receives a free legal defense from the company, in addition to an external team of 3 attorneys Google's legal team hired for extra support, and unlike me, she doesn't appear to be struggling. On LinkedIn, my former boss publicly announced she's enjoying an early retirement to focus on yoga, baking, knitting, and time to be still. Sounds nice. The toll this path has taken on my mental health, however, has been truly immeasurable. Last winter, amidst my lawsuit, full-time job, and caring for my 2 small children with frequent COVID daycare closures, I hit rock bottom. I hadn't slept more than a few hours a night in months. I also regularly woke up from nightmares with heart palpitations, and I sometimes experienced panic attacks right before logging onto VC meetings for work. Google had twice subpoenaed my employment records from my new job at Facebook and my story was in the news, so with so many eyes on my every move I felt pressure to overperform. What if what had happened at Google happened again? The precious few hours when I wasn't working or caring for my children was spent responding to lengthy discovery requests. All of it felt re-traumatizing, and I was at a breaking point. I knew something had to change, so I made the difficult decision to check myself into an inpatient mental health facility for a 30-day treatment program. Leaving behind my husband, children, and new job in the midst of a pandemic was never something I could have imagined for myself, but I needed urgent care. While in treatment, I worked with a team of psychiatrists and mental health professionals to develop a plan and coping strategies. I'm still not the person I once was before all of this, but I am trying to get there. It's scary for me to tell you this today, but I'm not ashamed about seeking help. I also know that Google's lawyers will try to use this information to smear me during my public trial. I'd prefer to tell my own story first. I also recognize that I am incredibly privileged to even have been able to receive mental health care in the first place. My family loaned me $55,000 for the facility's upfront costs, about a third of which was reimbursed by insurance. I was also lucky to have employment benefits allowing me to take medical leave. So many other workers or potential whistleblowers are not in a position to do what I did. And as a white, cisgendered, non-disabled woman in a dual-income marriage, I enjoy protections that so many others facing discrimination, harassment and retaliation do not. I know, because I hear from them nearly every week. As a whistleblower speaking out on the all-too-common experience of pregnancy discrimination, I'm regularly contacted by pregnant people and parents seeking my advice. I do everything I can to help them and recommend resources, but I don't always have time for everyone, and I'm often limited by what I can say because of my lawsuit. For that, I feel immense guilt. Many whistleblowers, in addition to their own battles and activism, are also taking on the unpaid responsibility of becoming support channels to other whistleblowers. Whistleblowing may be an individual action, but it's one that we take on in service of others. It's about working to make sure no one else has to go through what we did. There's so much more that I could share if I had the time. There's so much more I wish I could share if it weren't for the heavy layers of confidentiality that I'm bound by as a plaintiff in a lawsuit. And please know I'm not telling you this so you'll feel sorry for me. I'm telling you because things need to change. Whistleblowers deserve better. We need legal support, including assistance in finding the right legal representation and stronger protections under the law. We also need more funding to cover legal fees for plaintiffs in discrimination, harassment, and retaliation litigation. We desperately need more lawyers willing to do this work, which in its current state, is not nearly as lucrative as other forms of law. We should have fellowships to encourage more law schools to teach employment discrimination studies, and we need more scholarships and loan forgiveness programs to encourage students to become plaintiffs' attorneys. Many attorneys don't pursue this line of work simply because the weight of their student loan debt prevents them from doing so. We also need resources and funding to help connect whistleblowers to the right mental health support. Being a whistleblower so often wreaks havoc on your mental and physical health. Care while we are in the fight is crucial for preventing chronic health problems and should not be a luxury available to only the privileged few. The experience of whistleblowing is a grueling one, and it doesn't stop even if and when a lawsuit reaches its conclusion. Whistleblowers need funding to assist with their day-to-day expenses so they can support themselves and their families while healing from workplace trauma, but there has been some progress over the past few years, and for that I'm truly encouraged. The Silenced No More Act is a real triumph, and I hope it will inspire other states to sponsor similar legislation. There are now organizations like Lioness who do pro bono public relations work to help whistleblowers safely bring their stories to the world. I'm additionally happy to be able to now refer people who contact me to new resources like the Tech Worker Handbook, a collection of information put together by IFEMA Azoma and many others to guide tech workers before, during, and after the decision to speak out. And for anyone who has the means, I encourage you to contribute to the Solidarity Fund by coworker.org, a new fund that helped me, and also helps other tech workers engage in activism for better workplaces. I'm grateful to all the whistleblowers who have come before me. I continue to learn from and be inspired by them each day. And I know that not too long from now, we are all going to be tuning in to watch the next Francis or whistleblower we don't know yet testify before Congress. I'm sure I'll be tuning in along with you. I know they may look poised and confident and polished, and they are, but I challenge you to be mindful of the bigger picture. Know that you're not seeing the whole story. And know there are countless others who don't have the resources to take the same path. All of them need our support and our gratitude. Whistleblower, women in tech, diversity and inclusion, pregnancy discrimination. Legal, more from Chelsea Glasson, staff user researcher and manager at Compass. You can find me on Twitter at Chelsea Glasson. Thoughts here are my own. September 5, 2000.